Today I'm joined by Kevin Young. Kevin is Olympic champion 1992, the first man to run the 400-meter hurdles in under 47 seconds. World champion 1993, men's track and field athlete of the year 1992, first track and field ESPN award winner in 1993, and a Hall of Famer at the USATF in 2006. Welcome, Kevin.
Well, thank you very much. How do you do? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm fine. Kevin, for most of us mortals, running 400 meter is a challenge in itself. So you wanted to make it more difficult for yourself and put some hurdles in the way?
You know what happened in that case? I got duped into becoming a 400-meter hurdler. I wanted to be, I was a jumper, a triple jumper and a long jumper. And when it came to far as running hurdles, I only wanted to run the 110s. I had a cousin that was a 110 hurdler that I looked up to. But we actually happened to have a track meet in which we didn't have enough 300-meter hurdle racers in the event. So the coach kind of asked me to run in there. I jumped in the race, won it, and then the saga begins.
You know, the funny thing is that I actually interviewed the Olympic champion from 1992 in the 110-meter hurdles as well.
Mark McCoy.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has been on. It's an intense guy, but interesting. Really nice interview.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, what was your darkest moment as an athlete?
Darkest?
The darkest.
I've had a few. I would say as an athlete, though. The darkest moment I had as an athlete was, interesting. That's a good question. I never really thought it was too dark. I had a few. One time, when I was in high school, I was in my section. I was the best 110 hurdler in my section, and we were in a meeting. And I remember settling in the blocks, gun going off, and I took off, and I knew I didn't jump the gun. However, there was a second gunfire, and I got disqualified out of that race. And I had really prepared myself for that particular race, and I got DQ'd. And so when that happened, that was one of the most crushing moments of my track and field career. And from that point on, I've always just settled in the blocks and just waited for the gun. Because when you really, I see athletes where they've been in world championship competition, Olympic games, and all that sort of stuff, and have a false start, and it just distracts from all the hard work and preparation that you did to get yourself there, only for something like that to happen. So I'd rather be the last person out of the blocks than really being the very first person out of the blocks, just to know that I got the race started. But that was pretty hard. Anything other than that has been fine. It's all been a journey. Hasn't been any darkest moments, I would say. I put it this way: I kind of wish there were certain people alive to the day in which I set world records, the world record, that really could have appreciated my performance. Other than that, that's pretty much it.
How did you recover from that moment when you were disqualified, when you got disqualified?
I walked off the field. I walked up the track. Went somewhere behind the bleachers or off to a field, and I cried. I started to cry once the person stood in my lane with the flag and to let me know, to indicate that I was the one that got disqualified. I was just so crushed. And I walked away. I cried it off, and then I came back. I said, well, that'll be one event that I won't be able to participate in at this particular meeting. And I have participated in so many other events, 110s, 300-meter hurdles, the long jump, triple jump, high jump. I had enough disciplines in there in which to keep me busy, but on that particular day, I just wanted to run those 110s, and it didn't happen for me. But I learned the big lesson is, sometimes you don't want others to be at liberty to make decisions for you when you're in those sort of type of situations. So you just learn from it.
What was your best moment?
Best moment? I had best moment. All right, I've shared this with a good friend of mine the other day on the web. It was 1986 NCAA championships in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm racing against California 300-meter, 400-meter hurdle legend, the great Danny Harris. And I'm a sophomore at UCLA. So, of course, I grew up in LA, growing up in Watts. So I was glued to the television during the Los Angeles Olympics. And then to have someone, a native fellow from California, who I've seen race in high school, I looked up to go out there to race against Edwin Moses and give him, a run for his money and to win the silver medal. So Danny Harris has always been one of my, I would say, heroes, because when we had the 86 meet, it was, I think, his last collegiate race. And I got in that race, and he made me do something that kind of proceeded to what I ended up doing, I guess you would say, in Barcelona. That particular race, I was so hyped up racing against Danny that I flew out of the blocks, got to the very first hurdle. So instead of getting to the first hurdle with my left leg lead, I got to the very first hurdle with my right leg. So I was supposed to have gotten there in 20 steps with the left leg lead. I ended up getting to the hurdle in 19 steps with the right leg lead. It threw my cadence off. So I ended up going to the second hurdle with my left leg, the third hurdle with my right leg, the fourth hurdle with my left leg, and then the fifth hurdle, I was approaching it again with my right leg, being on 12-stripe pattern. But I remember as I approached the hurdle, I was trying to figure out in my head how to calculate the distance visually. So as I approached the fifth hurdle in that collegiate meet, I just took a leap of faith and took off, and I ended up clearing that hurdle instead of obviously 12. I went 11 steps and stepped over that particular hurdle, got over it, and proceeded on and got back on track to a rhythm of 13 steps. And I finished the race off. But Danny caught me around I guess maybe the eighth hurdle. He passed me by. He ended up winning his third national championship. But I was so happy that I was able to get through that race. And at that point, I realized that I had, I guess, the natural talent to be able to alternate like that. And it took me a number of years to find out that I actually went 11 steps between the hurdles. They had wrote about it in Track and Field News in one of the copies when it was a paper copy. And I remember reading about it in one of the little sections that they would have for student athletes. But it was until maybe 2004, 2002, between 2002 and 2004. A friend of mine, I think Tom Fuhrer, he worked for he worked for CBS News. And at that time, CBS, which is a broadcast station in the U.S., they would televise the NCAA championships. And so he actually got me a copy of that race. And I hadn't seen that race ever, just being a participant in it. And I remember getting a copy of the race and checking it out. And I'm going, whoa, I actually did go 11 steps. And just kind of the build up into it. I've actually put it on a YouTube channel, slowing it down, showing the stride pattern in which I took. So I was capable of going, well, that day I went 11 steps. So that was like the biggest kind of like mind-blowing, greatest thing that I ever accomplished at that time. It wasn't until the first round in Barcelona in 1992 that I actually went 11 steps again. And it's one of those situations where you're just in phenomenal shape and you acquiesce to the feeling in the moment that you happen to be in. You just kind of free flow and go with it. And it happened. So that was like the greatest moment. Obviously, winning the gold medal in '92 and setting the world record, that was really cool too as well. But I think, to be honest with you, the fact that I had the opportunity to race against some really great athletes, because I was, a person who sat as a spectator. I was more of a fan than, a performer. But when I did get my opportunity to perform, I learned a lot being in a lot of races, taking second, third, fourth place, being in the B races and the C races, bouncing around Europe, but just being, I guess I'll say, a student of the event. So I really enjoyed just running. I can talk all day, you know that, right?
Yeah, really cool.
That was one of my biggest moments, that NCAA meet race.
How did you make sure you stay calm when you're racing your role model or hero?
How do I stay calm? I come from very humble beginnings, man. Like I said, I was the kid holding the door for all the other athletes. You know, my first love was basketball. I thought I was going to be Dr. J, but my body type and my skill set wasn't really recognized in basketball. And plus, I guess what ended up happening was I found that I was better in athletics. So whatever attention that I was giving to basketball definitely went towards athletics, especially when you had the other disciplines involved with the high jump, triple jump, long jump. So I was pretty spread out. And when I started having success in high school, mind you, and that's when I went into the direction of the athletics. And of course, when you had the Olympic Games coming to your town, and you see these great athletes, and then I just started reminiscing of the individuals that meant a lot to me growing up in Los Angeles and Compton and Watts, and reading about a lot of the great athletes of the 60s, Tommy Smith, John Carlos, those guys, Mel Pender, the Mighty Burner, which is Larry Freeman, you get Vince Matthews, all those guys, So those, like basically the gentleman from the '68 Olympic team in Mexico City. I remember this, like I said, as a youngster, reading up on those guys and looking at all the photographs that were taken over the years. And then as I became slowly involved into this Olympic family, how actually went from fan of those individuals to actually fellow Olympian, and to the point where I become like baby brother, going to these different events, kind of in awe and shocked watching these great athletes that meant so much to me when I was a young one. And then just basically having that connection with them as I grew up, and just literally being in awe. I remember when I would be in rooms with Willie Davenport, and I would just want to pinch myself, because when you sit back and you read about these great athletes, and then now you're at a track and field symposium or a conference, and you sit next to them, and they come right off the page and off the silver screen, right there in front of you, and you go, wow, I'm actually here. And they're looking at me like, like, you're the man, you're the world record holder, Kevin. And I'm like, but no, you're one of my childhood heroes. So it makes everything come full circle. How important it is to have superheroes as role models, because those guys, where I grew up in LA and Compton, you have two things going on for you. Either you gotta, go to class and be stuck in class and try to have, use your education, be an athlete, or try your best to be an athlete. And I was one of those dudes where I love going to class and I love participating in sports. So I had to find that nice little wiggle room, because I enjoyed my teachers and the information that they provided for me, but actually I enjoyed my coaches just as well, of the discipline they provided for me, and gave me an opportunity to do things both in the classroom and outside the classroom. So I think I'm just a good package of good learning. But yeah, my heroes, my Olympic heroes, I got a chance to hang out with them and talk to them and chill out with them and have cocktails with them, and it's a great experience, because a lot of athletes nowadays, they don't have that experience. They don't. I can literally say I looked up to a lot of those guys, Tommy and John, and got a chance to go to their homes and hang out and be in their backyard and eat dinner with them and share all kind of cool things. And I remember as a kid, when I was 4 and 5 years old, reading about these guys in the history books, it was always like, wow, it'd be great to ever meet these individuals. Now, years later, I'm actually a family member with John Carlos. His wife is one of my cousins, one of my distant cousins. I'm a distant cousin of John Carlos, but we hang out like he's my big brother. And I think that's like one of the sweetest relationships that I do have, is to be able to just kind of fall up in there with these great Olympians, and not just the ones from the U.S., as well as the individuals from other places. I remember just being a fan when Cole was running and Ovett were running, and I mentioned Mark McCoy with you earlier, watching those guys, because when I came on in '86, it was my very first international meeting was the 1986 Goodwill Games that we had in Moscow. So that's when I came on the scene. '86 was a big year for me. I became this international athlete, unbeknownst to me, and it was like the best thing that ever happened, because I realized two things. I had to go back to Watts in the summertime. I spend my summers in Europe, and then I would come back home, and from time to time between the periods where we did have meetings and go back to LA. And to be honest with you, all my friends or individuals in the neighborhoods that I grew up in and out, they were out there in siege with drugs and gangs and all that. I would come home, you know, maneuver through all that sort of stuff, getting back and forth between the West Side, UCLA, where I live, in the Valley, and coming back to Watts, where I grew up. And it was just an experience amongst itself. And to be able to survive that, but have an opportunity to be in Europe in the summertime and going to all these different places. I'll be honest with you, my track and field career was pretty much a storybook career. You know, I ran with Santa Monica Track Club. You couldn't get no better than that running with SMTC in the 80s. You know, that was really cool.
Yeah. And that Olympic final in 1992. So you won the title, meaning the gold medal, and you set a new world record. What's the sweeter experience, the gold medal or the world record?
It's kind of like ice cream with the sprinkles. I'm just going to give it to you like that. You know, it's that extra bonus that you get, that little prize, that extra prize you get in the bag when you don't expect it, or that extra you get the gift card with the money in it. You're like, oh, the card is great. And you flip it open, it's like, you know, 20 euro in there, 100 euro in there. You're like, oh, that's even better. I would say the gold medal. I mean, the record came because I prepped myself, because I wanted, to be honest with you, I wanted to win a medal. It wouldn't have mattered had I won the gold, silver, or the bronze. I wanted to be a medalist, because I missed out in '88 in Seoul with that fourth place finish behind Edwin. So I had 4 years to think about becoming a medalist. And so, of course, I would have to say becoming, I remember running down the straightaway, coming home, trying to figure out which finger I'm going to put up to go across the finish line, number one, and knowing that I was going to not only win a medal, but get a medal, but obviously win the gold medal. And then when the world record was mentioned, I was like, okay, I did it in style and in fashion. I did it the K Young way. I think that was important, because I had talked about that record in my, personally, interpersonally, all these conversations that I had with myself, and prepping myself on, what would it be like to break a world record? The crazy thing about the question that you asked me is that even during the course of my training, I would practice waving at the crowd, just to kind of take my mind off the exhausting workouts that I would do at UCLA. So, of course, when you run, one of the first things your coaches will always tell you, when you start leaning over, putting your hands over your knee, stand up, get up, walk it off, get off your knees, get off the track. So one of the mechanisms of which I utilized was I would finish a race after, running, and I breathe in and out of my nose as opposed to breathing out of my mouth. So I'll regulate my heartbeat and my rhythm breathing through my nose. And while doing that, I would obviously have to stay mobile and walk along and recover. So one of my recovery stages was just to breathe and walk. And while I was doing that, in my head, I would imagine waving at the crowd, and I could hear the cheers. So I would be breathing through my nose, and I'd be shaking, trying to shake the fatigue out of my arms, but I'm waving at the crowd. And I remember my teammates, they're looking at me like, is he all right? Is he crazy? And I would laugh. We would all laugh about me doing that sort of stuff. And when I broke the world record, it was something that it was natural to me. I was like, okay, I hear the crowd, I'm waving at them, So I didn't really freak out, to be honest with you. I was just so happy that I actually, won that gold medal.
Really cool. If you could go back in time 10, 15, 20 years, what advice would you give a younger Kevin?
Younger Kevin, what advice? Be honest with you, one would be spend more time with my mother, invest in my family, which would be by my nieces and nephews. I don't have any children personally, but I have a bunch of nieces and nephews, and I think that if I were to go back in time, I would have incorporated more of them into my track and field career, as opposed to having a track career and not necessarily keeping them out, but just kind of being solely dominated with what I was doing. I would have really kind of got them more involved and enlightened about what track and field was all about. And I would say commercially, sort of try to create a K Young empire. back then as opposed to, nowadays, with T-shirts and caps and hoodies and that sort of stuff, little stuff. But I would have involved them a bit more than 20 years after the fact. Because I think my nieces and nephews, they really don't even know who their uncle really, what I actually accomplished. A lot of them not really into track. They just hear this and that. But I realized over the years I've actually made history, just as I flipped the pages and how Tommy Smith and John Carlos meant to me when I was 4 and 5 years old at the barbershop, looking in the Jet magazine, seeing their pictures and reading about them and hearing the conversations in which they had about those great athletes. Because I think it's interesting when I meet other people that always tell me, do you know who you are? And I have to ask myself, sometimes I don't. I don't realize the impact I've made on the sport.
I saw an interview with you and Otto Bolton that you were mentor to Otto Bolton. Two questions. Did you have a mentor when you were younger? And how do you see the role of having and the importance of having a mentor for young aspiring athletes?
Yeah, the role of having a mentor is important for anybody, whether you're an athlete or a person in business. Or you just need somebody who you can lean up against, this ponder questions with, and get advice from. My mentors when I were younger, I would have to say, inadvertently would be my mother. I love my mom, and so I have always listened up to her. But outside of the home, I would say I had a number of individuals who I took a lot of I excuse them for their shortcomings, but I took a lot of advice from them, from the good things that they've taught me. Me having a mentor, I've had educators, teachers, and professors that I really looked up to. But someone who would constantly give me information that I would need on an everyday basis, that's a hard one. That's very hard. I can't even say that I had much of a mentor as an individual. But there were, like I said, there have been individuals who I've been able to pick the phone up or even kind of spoke to. I would say John Smith at one period of time was a good mentor to myself, John Smith. But you know what? I know somebody who I can actually say was a mentor of mine, and they'd probably be shocked at me telling me this. It was one of my coaches, Steve Lang. Now, Coach Lang, I had known this brother since I was in high school, and he coached a number of athletes at Fremont High School, and they were always a lot better than I was. And I would compete in these races with his athletes, and he was the type of coach that he always praised me as well. And I guess he must have saw something about me when I was back in high school, when I was, I first started running track while in high school, before the middle school stuff. But he's always been there. He became a coach at UCLA, and he wasn't necessarily an in-your-face kind of guy, but he was always there when I needed him. And I'm sure if I would have leaned on him, he would have really gave me a lot more game than he provided. But it would definitely be Coach Steve Lang. I just sitting there thinking about that. I'm glad you brought that question up to me, because I had to sit there and think about somebody who would have known, who actually know what my journey has been in the sport. And he would be the one, literally, from the very first time we started running the 110 hurdles and long jumping, he would know the direction and the movement in which I've made it. Like I said, he became a coach at UCLA, and he's also a Bruin. He was on the 72, 73 UCLA track and field team. He's a triple jumper. And he's a local cat, grew up in L.A., and it's funny because he kind of understood the perils of the things in which I would have been going through growing up in Los Angeles at that time. Because a lot of folks failed to realize that in the 80s, early 80s in LA, especially in Watson Compton, that's when there was a lot of gang proliferation and drug activity, and a lot of my peers were joined in gangs and becoming very violent in the street, being incarcerated, and there's just so many athletes who are far more talented than me that never got the opportunity to go out there and participate because of the actions of some of the things which they did or some of the things which they got kind of caught up into as a youngster. thank God I had athletics to kind of keep me on that path. But believe me, I was straying away every now and then doing dumb stuff. But yeah, my mentor was definitely Steve Lang. I need to call him up today and let him know.
Good. And now the $1 million question. You mentioned
Yeah.
mentors are important not only for athletes but also for any other person.
Oh yes, yes, yes. I
How?
think what happens is during the course of our lives, we need different people to represent to us what we can do or capable of doing during the course of our lives. You know, like I said, Coach Lang is a person who was there for me while I was on the track. Off the track, you know, and it's interesting because I've never really invited. I think one's career changes, and I'm trying to think of someone who I've always was able to have a conversation with outside of. It's interesting. I really couldn't tell you, but there are a lot of individuals, family members. Mel Pender, I can give Mel Pender, who's the 6'8" Olympian, 4x1, uh, uh, Vietnam veteran, uh, Hall of Famer in so many different Hall of Fames. I think he's one of our top oldest Olympians. Mel's about 81 years old, and I remember reading about Mel Pender. Like I said, on that 68 team, he was on 64 and the 68 team, but he. When I moved around, he's always been somebody that always gave me advice. You know, he was always somebody, to this day, he's, someone I can pick up the phone with and pick up and talk to and share information with. But interesting enough, I guess you could also have a mentor who could be in your own age group. There's individuals who made better moves than I may have over the years, or made different moves than I've made over my lifetime or my current lifetime, that I actually get on the phone and have these conversations with and talk to about. So, yeah, having a mentor is very, very important. Do you have any mentors? I'm curious.
Well, I don't think necessarily formal mentors, but there are certainly people I learn from, and mostly
Exactly. I think as you get
I
older, it gets to the point where you just try to grab as much great information from the
yeah.
great minds that are around you.
And I'm always more the kind of a guy who looks at people who walk the walk rather than talking the talk. So I much rather learn from the way they
The actions.
behave, interact, what they have achieved through
Yes.
their actions. So
That's funny. That's how John is to me. John Carlos is to me. He's one of those individuals that he just moves a certain way, and I watch him. And like I say, I grab all this information collectively and just kind of just take the good with it and package it up the way I needed to package it, internalize it, and then whenever I have an opportunity to share with younger athletes, I give it my best. I think especially now, because in the past you had to make a greater effort to know who these individuals were. You have to pick up the book, you have to read the book, you have to stay in tune to what's going on in the sport. But now with technology, you can just pretty much flick a switch and go to an app, and you get all the information in front of you, and you can be disillusioned that it's so easy for athletes to accomplish what they've done. I'm like, nah. Yeah. But for a fan of the sport, it makes it more energizing, like I said, when I've read about these individuals and finally meeting them. But I find a lot of my fans, I guess you would say, folks who connected with me online on the web, and they tell me things like, I've seen your race on television or on the computer. However, I've read about you. You're one of my heroes. And it's interesting to try to make sure I try to respond and connect with those folks. It's hard, man. I got 3 Facebook pages, right? I got like a personal page that morphs as a fan page. Then I got a fan page that doesn't have enough fans on it, because I got so many people on my personal page. And I got some people on the waiting list on the fan page. I wish there's a way in the system you can just
move them,
shift everybody to the fan page, those who are fans, because even when I try to connect with folks on Facebook on my other page, they're applying to me or replying to me on Facebook, I can't even add anybody because I think I've reached my personal 5,000 limit. So I'm like, go to the other pages and I'll respond there. But it's crazy because you definitely would need somebody to kind of Well, folks, so they got people monitoring their pages and all that. That is the truth, because it can be a lot of work. And I'm not sure if I really want to spend my time responding to people. I'd rather be more active in doing the things that I enjoy doing. So, but being in Louisville is amazing. It's an eye opener to say the least. You know, I guess from the educational aspect, it's been literally. I was talking with somebody. I may have put a post to my IG. It's literally 30 years after me finishing my undergrad that I'm back in school. So there's a lot of information. There's a lot of mind and roadblocks of everything, and just the whole way and connection that my brain has been over the past 30 years. Being in class is a lot different now. You know, I got to kind of read stuff over and over and over and over again just to kind of shake myself up and go, wow, okay, that's what I'm learning. You know, I'm realizing that a lot of my classmates are super smart. But I love the fact that I'm here in Louisville, of all places. I would have never guessed I would be at this university.
What are the habits that make you a successful athlete and person?
A few things. I would say to be an athlete or a successful person, you have to create a routine for yourself. I mean, even talking to you now, just being here, you have to, under whatever particular circumstance that you may be in, you have to create a routine for yourself just to kind of make the monotony a lot easier and the repetition of doing things a lot more comfortable. Because typically happens, not much changes once you figure out a particular formula, you know. And I'm finding that out today. Even now, one of the things before this interview, I was in a terrible bus accident when I was in my first semester in Swansea. If you hadn't read about it, it was in the papers there.
I did read about it.
Yeah, and after the accident, you know, prior to the accident, I was doing a lot of exercises, and then I realized during the course of the accident, I had to do a lot of stuff with my abdominals and my shrugs and stuff. And the way I remember hitting the windshield in the bus, I think the way my body was kind of in shape, sort of, it kind of took a lot of the impact of me having that particular injury. And I was actually able to walk away from there. You know, although I had a couple broken ribs, it could have been far worse. And just reflecting on that, I know it's important, especially in my age now, that being healthy has to be a routine that one has to indulge in every day. So now with my ribs getting better, now I got to start this exercise routine. And I was just thinking, okay, Kevin, are you willing to get up each day at, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning just to make sure you're consistent in doing something? And I had to convince myself this morning that, okay, yeah, I've already envisioned what I needed to do in order to get myself in shape. There's like a dip bar and a pull-up bar that's maybe 200, 300, maybe 400 meters away from here. They have like a little open area. So now I have to convince myself that at least within a 3-day range, I have to go back-to-back 3 days and kind of get things started. I think for most people, we have a tendency of not starting things. So getting healthy, eating a bit more properly, getting my rest, of course, but also enjoying life, man. You have to really, when you go to different places, you have to, I'm here in Louisville, and I'm looking at these beautiful buildings, and I'm meeting different people, and I'm like, you know what, there's a reason why I'm here, so I need to enjoy as much of this as I possibly can. And there's a lot of things that they're doing here in the city. I know, the interesting, but as far as make things routine for you that you do over and over and over, and be open to reading things that you want to make a difference into, That's the truth. You have to just be consistent in your movements, Think about it. It's pretty interesting if you become routine at something, and you gotta make it fun. Now, too, a lot of folks do routine things, but they don't make it fun. They become very robotic, and it gets boring to them. And they convince themselves that, okay, I'm just doing this because I got to make this money to do that, and I got to pay this bill. But if you can create a routine, that's why track became one of those inadvertent things because I didn't look at it. I never looked at it as having a track and field career, and I guess I can fault myself because I never created up until I guess now with the information I've been discussing with others since I love track so much. I've always you mentioned a time where, well, you kind of alluded to where I may have didn't care too much about track. I guess the dark day of track for myself. I can go back to that question and tell you that it was when I didn't feel personally that I was of any value within the sport because I felt that the sport itself, different bodies and this and that, did not provide me with any sort of adulation, which was the wrong mindset that I should have been having at that point in time. Over the years, I've been able to say, well, you know what, my contribution is what it is, and I'm cool with that. So, but there was a point in time I felt like, why I'm not this poster child for this, why I'm not that particular poster child for that. And I'm seeing these opportunities happen with other athletes who've had these regrettable pasts, whether it be with drugs and all other kind of stuff. And I'm going, damn, how come that happened to them? And, and I had to get over myself, right? Because I realized the beauty of me being involved in sport was the simple fact that I've always had the opportunity to do something I love doing. And what I've gotten out of it was, the travel, meeting different people, and having conversations with folks who an individual like myself typically would not be having. But got to be routine. I'm sure when you started interviewing the athletes, even the formulation of your questions, that sheet of questions that you had is perfect because it touches so many aspects of the things and thoughts that athletes may have. And the fact that when you're probably first doing that, the list was probably maybe 2 or 3 questions. And then you may figure out, okay, what can I ask and add to the list that makes it more well-rounded? And by me looking at the question that you had, I said, oh, these are cool questions to ask. So I appreciate you even wanting to have me involved in your podcast. I think it's pretty cool.
Thank you. I saw in the interview, I think it was the interview with Otto Bolton, you said you had to prove something for yourself as an athlete.
Yeah.
Where did that come from, and do you still have it?
I definitely still have it. And where did it come from? I guess it came from growing up in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, because what typically would happen, and actually I'm the youngest of 7 kids, so I was always an introvert, so I never was one to express myself. But I've always enjoyed doing interesting things. So I'm kind of like you. I might say much about something, that doesn't mean I'm not paying any attention to it, because I was always one that wanted to learn how to do something. And I remember learning the intermediate hurdles and watching how the race was ran, and watching all the individuals around me and the successes in which they've had. And just looking at the numbers on paper and what I was capable of doing, I realized, I said, you know what? I have to change my mindset and quit trying to run under, quit trying to run faster than Edwin Moses with the 47:02, and just run what I'm capable of running. But what I can be impactful on will be just the style, the way in which I ran. How efficient could Kevin Young run the race? And I think when I looked at what I was able and capable of doing with my own race, it allowed me to take my mind outside of being focused solely on Edwin, 47:02, and the world record. When in fact, I said, okay, if I break the race down based upon the way in which I've been able to run in the past and now, it's really all about me on the track. It's not about Edwin. It's not about the world record. It's not about 47:02. It's about, all right, Kevin, as you run this particular race in these particular critical zones of the race, what can you achieve from the start of the blocks to the first 3 hurdles? What do you need to be to run as optimal as you possibly can in certain portions of the race, and how can you finish the race? And when I started looking at it that way, I was like, oh wow, I can run under 47 seconds. I just looked at it like that, not breaking any records, but I'm just saying to myself, I think I can run under 47 seconds. It looks good on paper, and so the application itself was, okay, what's going to be the best way of making this happen? And over the years, I was actually able to do just that. And when it really kind of let me know that I was able to put that sort of or type of race together, it took a load off my shoulders, because at that point it just became about executing a certain way in which I wanted to run. And the focus and the key of the focus was to make sure I kept everybody else out of my own head. You know, as a runner, you got enough to think about yourself, but when you get there on the field, because I remember in the past getting in major races, 91 World Championships in Tokyo, the 87 Goodwill game, not Goodwill Games, the 87 Pan American Games in Indianapolis, 87 World Championships in Rome, or even our USA Championships. I didn't make I was an alternate on the Rome team. Goodwill Games in '86. I remember just being in those races and filling it out and knowing what I was capable of doing, but I just didn't put it together until I saw, like, Kevin, just put your race together. And once you've done that, you will see where it falls into place.
How long did you need to put it all together if you look at the time span?
You know what? I wasn't. You know, it's one of those things which you really can't push. It just kind of has to come to you, because you don't know the different things that kind of going into that. You have, whether you're in shape or not, the time of the season, or you're going to be in certain races with a certain amount of talent that's going to be capable of pushing you there. You know, how's your conditioning? Are you healthy? Are you recovering from any type of injury? What time of the year are you trying to do something? You know, when would be best for you to do even to run as fast as you possibly can. And I literally, the interesting thing of 1992 is when my season had started, I think the very first race I ran was either 48:18, and it went up like a bell jar. I got faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. 46:78 at the Olympics, and then my time started going down from there. Mm-hmm. When I ran the Grand Prix final, which was in Torino that year, the Mobile Grand Prix final, which basically would be the Diamond League's big party, I ended up running the exact same time that I start the season off with. But this is what happened. After 1989, when I was ranked the #1 hurdler in the world, I think a lot of guys got injured and didn't participate and perform, but I had the fastest time. I think it was 47.89 seconds. And it was the first time I was ever ranked #1 in the world, I think. And obviously the year before, Andre was the #1 ranked hurdler, winning the gold medal in Seoul. So the following year, I'm the #1 ranked intermediate hurdler. And 89 was a special year for me. And so when I realized that the number 4689, using the number 89, became the goal in which I wanted to be able to run. So I started mentally incorporating that 4689 and everything that I would do with bank cards and stuff like that. That particular number was associated with a lot of stuff, to the point I tell the story about writing and drawing pictures on the wall in the Olympic Village, which I did. So I had imprinted that number in my head. So looking at that number, putting it on paper, it made sense based upon the way in which I was capable of running the race. And after breaking it down analytically by the numbers, I figured, from the blocks of the very first 185 meters, which is roughly the first five hurdles. We always say 200 meters, but the first 5 meters, 185. I just had to get there faster than 22 seconds. And during the course of my career running, I've always gotten there in 22 seconds or better. On the slow end, you get there in 22. On the fast end, you get there in 20 and change, what a lot of these runners are doing now. You got Warham and Rye and Tom, but they're getting there in 20.5. They're running exceptionally fast for the first 5 hurdles. So when I realized that I was capable of I just needed to get there in 22 seconds, and I just have another 24 seconds and change to finish the second 200 of the race. And that basically keeps the race under 47 seconds. And so I remember orchestrating a number of workouts that, okay, Kevin, we're going to run the very first. And when it comes to the intermediate hurdles, it's always about the last 5 anyway. I don't care, give a damn, whatever people say. and I've watched this time and time again. I've even had this conversation with a number of the hurdlers over the years, is why you guys are spending so much energy on the first portion of the race when you're going to pay for it on the back end, when you can run a more even race and don't exert as much energy the first half and save that on the second half, because when you start fatiguing, it seems like your stride length is going to do two things. You're either going to get too long or it's going to get too short. And you still got to negotiate that 35 meters over the last few hurdles. So if your stride's getting too long or too short, either two things are going to happen. You're either going over a hurdle too high, right? And this is just when you're going over hurdles. If you, in the foot race, because I realize I've seen hurdlers, once they come off the 10th hurdle, it's a whole nother race at that point. It's all on the track, and then you just turn over and run it. But as you're clearing hurdles, you have to keep in mind that, you know, your parabola going over the barrier itself has to be intact for once you touch back down and running in between. And I literally seen the world record when Rye and Carson ran in Zurich of last year. They ran on a pace faster than the world record based on my numbers, all the way to the last two hurdles that both hurdlers have ran. I think Carson went 15 steps to the last two hurdles, which cost him. He was fast, like I say, he was exceptional. Both of them were fast off the last hurdle into the finish. But those microseconds going over the last two barriers, going 15 over the last two cost Carson, and then for Rye going 14 over the last barrier cost him. So once they clean that, once they'll be able to bounce that off, their energy on the back end, they'll run under 47 seconds. That's not even an issue. The interesting thing about it, being honest with you, is the talent that I see that Rye has, and even Samba. Rye is a sub 20-second 200-meter runner, which is crazy. And it's interesting to know how fast Carson can run a 200, or even Samba. But that's what's going to make the race so interesting, because you know the strengths and weaknesses that the athletes has. You know, I will say the strength that Carson has is he's a former DECA athlete, so now he doesn't have to work out in 9 other events. He can concentrate on the 400-meter hurdles. He can just leave that be. You know, so mentally he's there already. You know, I couldn't imagine being a DECA athlete going in and day out, going through all these events and trying to be the best you possibly can, you know, to your ability in 10 events over a 2-day process. I mean, that's beating the body up like constantly. And so mentally he's strong as hell. So when he goes out there and does what he does, I shake my head and I laugh, because I say, man, to be mentally in the position that he is. Then you got Rye Benjamin. This guy's just fast as he's from his height and size. He's quick. He's very, very talented, very fast hurdler, and he's a good hurdler. Samba is an exceptional hurdler, though. The young man from Qatar. I see him do things on the track with the left leg and right leg just being so ambidextrous. I go, wow, did he just do that? And so when you get a combination of individuals with those sort of strengths, it's just a chess game to see who's going to outmatch each other with wits. And they will have, over this particular season, 2020, hopefully they'll have enough races to participate in, whether they run against one another or not. And if they're not running against each other, hopefully the quality of those events are at the level that they would need to be once they all got together to push themselves. So it's going to be interesting, very interesting. So be honest with you, I think leading up until the games, I think that pushing 46.78 and telling everybody that's the number they're all shooting for, that's where my marketability has to be at now while I'm here in Leuven and going forward.
Mm-hmm.